A struggling single father walks miles through a storm just to fulfill his daughter's simple birthday wish, her favorite ice cream. Soaked and shivering, he's nearly invisible to the world until a sleek luxury car pulls over. Inside is a woman used to power and wealth, but not used to the kind of love she sees in his sacrifice. What begins as a one-time gesture evolves into a story of quiet dignity, healing, and second chances. The sky was a dull, gray blanket by mid-afternoon, already heavy with the scent of rain. The kind that promised not just a drizzle, but a downpour with something to say. Inside a modest apartment above a shuttered laundromat, the lights flickered as thunder rolled far off in the distance. Evan Harper knelt beside his daughter's bed, tying the frayed laces of her sneakers. Lila, turning 7 that day, sat with a small, handmade crown on her head construction paper and glitter glue still drying at the edges. "Do you think it'll really rain?" she asked, looking toward the narrow window. Evan glanced up. "If it does, the storm's got nothing on your smile." She giggled. "That's so cheesy," he smiled. "No, I've been saving that line for today." Her expression turned more serious. "Dad, did you get the ice cream?" Evan hesitated. They'd talked about it for weeks, chocolate raspberry swirl, her favorite, the kind that cost more than their weekly groceries allowed. "I'm going after work," he said, kissing her forehead. "Promised, remember?" She looked unconvinced. "You always say that, then you get too tired." He placed a hand on his heart. "Today's different." She nodded slowly, then wrapped her arms around him. "It's okay if you forget. I know you work hard." But that only hardened his resolve. He couldn't give her the dollhouse her friends had or the themed birthday party with balloons and clowns. But he could give her this, her favorite ice cream, even if it meant skipping dinner or walking miles. Evan's job that day was a double shift split between warehouse work and a delivery run. He stuffed a granola bar into his jacket pocket and left with a whisper to himself, "It's just rain." By late afternoon, the clouds opened. The streets were slick, the air thick with the scent of wet asphalt and the sharp sting of cold. But Evan didn't stop. Not when the buses were delayed, not when his boots soaked through. He only had one mission: to return home with that ice cream before bedtime. He didn't notice the sleek black car that slowed beside him yet. The warehouse clock ticked louder than usual as the end of Evan's shift neared. The old fluorescent lights above buzzed, casting pale flickers over crates and forklifts. His hands were raw from stacking pallets, his back tight from bending too much, but his mind was elsewhere. Raspberry swirl, the kind with real chocolate shavings and just a hint of tart. Had already mapped the route to the grocery store that carried it 4 blocks down, then 3, over past the old train tracks. No bus today. His paycheck had covered rent, school supplies, and Lila's shoes. There wasn't enough left for even a cheap umbrella. Outside, the wind had shifted. The sky was charcoal now, low and full of warning. Rain had begun falling in hesitant taps then, as if someone had turned a dial. It became a furious curtain. Evan shoved his hands into the thin jacket that barely kept out the chill and stepped into the storm. His co-workers had stayed behind, shaking their heads. "You're walking in this?" Evan had just smiled. Birthday mission. By the time he reached the corner store, he was drenched, his jeans clinging to his legs, hair flattened and boots squishing with every step. His fingers trembled from the cold as he pushed open the door, and warm air greeted him like a hug. But what stopped him was the empty freezer shelf. He stared for a long moment. A single sticker marked where the chocolate raspberry swirl should have been. Out of stock. The clerk noticed him. "Hey, sorry man, that flavor's been gone since Tuesday. Truck didn't come today." Evan gave a tight smile. "Anywhere else nearby, sell it." The clerk shrugged. "Maybe the 24-hour place near Jefferson." "But that's 14 blocks away," Evan finished. He knew. He looked outside again. The rain hadn't stopped. In fact, it had gotten worse. But he couldn't return home without the one thing Shed asked for. So he pulled up his hood, tightened the straps of his old backpack, and stepped out into the flood. Car passed splashing water onto the sidewalk. Pedestrians rushed by, huddled under umbrellas, barely glancing at the man walking steadily through the storm. To them, he was no one. But in his heart, he walked with purpose. And that was when the luxury car rolled up beside him, black sleek, the kind you only see in magazines. The tinted window lowered. "Excuse me," a woman's voice called. "You need a ride." Evan blinked, unsure if he'd heard right, And for the first time that day, something shifted just slightly. The storm hadn't let up. But maybe something else had just begun. The rain didn't let up. If anything, it seemed personal. Now, like the sky had chosen Evan specifically, soaking through his already worn hoodie and dripping into his boots. But he kept going step after step, hugging the curb and dodging the deeper puddles when he could. His backpack stuck to his back, heavy with water. His hands were starting to go numb, but he kept checking his phone for directions. The cracked screen blinking raindrops away as he rerouted toward the 24-hour grocery near Jefferson. He didn't care how long it would take. He had made a promise. His daughter Lila had turned 7 that morning. She didn't ask for toys or cake or even a party. She just looked up at him with wide eyes and whispered, "Daddy, can I have the swirly ice cream like last time?" He had nodded then, smiled like it was easy. But it wasn't. Traffic hissed past him as he trudged on headlights, casting brief halos in the foggy downpour. At one intersection, he waited 5 minutes for a light to change, blinking against the sting of rain in his eyes. A delivery truck splashed a tidal wave across the sidewalk. He didn't flinch. By the time he reached the Jefferson store, nearly an hour had passed. His hands were trembling from cold and fatigue, and his knees ached. Inside, the store lights were too bright, almost offensive after the dim gray of the storm. But their bottom shelf, just behind the vanilla and rocky road, it was there. Chocolate raspberry swirl. He exhaled slowly as though the storm inside him had calmed too. He took it to the counter, and the clerk, a teenager with earbuds, and barely glanced at him. $3.75, the boy said. Evan pulled out damp bills, counted them twice. He had $4 left. After this, there would be nothing, not even enough for a bus fare home. Still, he handed the money over carefully, shielding the carton in the plastic bag the clerk offered. As he stepped back outside, he took a deep breath of cold air and looked up. Still raining. But he smiled, because this walk back, this long, freezing, soaking walk, would be worth every step. He just didn't know someone else had been watching from down the block. A car idling, headlights dimmed, and a woman in the back seat leaning forward, frowning. Curious, moved, waiting for the right moment. Evan had barely made it 2 blocks when the wind picked up. Sheets of rain slapped against his cheeks. The plastic bag holding the ice cream flapped violently in his grip, and for a terrifying moment, he thought it might tear. He cupped it tighter to his chest, shielding it with his body. He didn't notice the car at first. The street was quiet. Most people were inside out of the storm. A few blinking lights in distant apartment windows. A gutter gurgled beside the sidewalk. Then a low hum approached behind him, the sound distinct and smooth, too quiet to be an average engine. The black luxury car glided to a stop beside him. He glanced over, cautious. The tinted passenger window slid down with a whisper. A woman in her mid-30s leaned forward from the back seat, her face partially shadowed but sharply defined. Umbrella dark eyes, clean-cut coat, confidence that didn't need to shout. "Are you all right?" she asked. Evan straightened. "Yeah, just heading home." She tilted her head. "You're soaked," he offered, a half smile. "Not the first time. Just ice cream delivery for my daughter. Birthday treat." There was a pause. Then the woman opened her door and stepped out into the rain. Not in heels, not in designer shoes, but in flats practical. She held no umbrella. "I'll give you a ride," she said. He hesitated. "You don't even know me. I saw you walking a mile back. You've been out in this for at least an hour." "Let me help." Evan's instinct screamed no. Pride, safety. He looked down at his shoes caked in mud, dripping onto the pavement. "I'd ruin your leather," he joked. She smiled gently. "They're just seats." Behind her, the driver got out and opened the door wider. Evan exhaled, looked at the melting ice cream in his hands, then at the woman. There was something steady about her, not pity presence. He nodded. "All right, just a short ride. And thank you." She didn't reply at first, just climbed back in and waited for him to follow. Inside, the cabin smelled of clean leather and something faintly citrus. Quiet classical music played. The world outside stormed, and all faded behind double-glazed silence. Only then did she finally say her name. "Call me Rowan." He turned to her. "Evan," she nodded. Neither spoke for a moment. The car glided forward, and somewhere in the stillness, in the soft rumble of tires, in the ticking of the wipers, something shifted. Not fate exactly, but possibility. Inside the quiet warmth of the luxury car, Evans sat stiffly aware of every soaked thread clinging to his skin. The plastic bag with the ice cream was cradled on his lap like something fragile and sacred. Rowan watched him from the opposite seat, hands neatly folded. Her hair, though slightly damp from stepping out, still framed her face with precision. She didn't speak right away, allowing the hum of the engine and the patter of rain to fill the space between them. "You really were going to walk the whole way," she said softly. Evan nodded. "Done it before, not a big deal." She glanced toward the driver, who met her gaze in the mirror, then looked back at Evan. "This city has 20 rideshare apps and 1,000 umbrellas. Yet here you are. I didn't come asking for charity," he said gently but firmly. Rowan tilted her head, intrigued. "I didn't say you did." He gave her a measured look. "Then why stop?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because sometimes the world feels heavy, and if I can make it even a little lighter for someone, I should. Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" He nodded slowly. "And sometimes people just need directions. Not a lift, not a rescue." Rowan smiled faintly. "Okay, then let me give you directions." She leaned forward, pulled a small tablet from the seat pocket, and opened a detailed city map. "Where do you live?" Evan gave an address, not the full street number, just enough to point toward the neighborhood. She nodded, tapped a few times, and turned the screen toward him. "If you cut through this alley behind the deli, it'll shave off 6 blocks. There's a covered awning behind the laundromat. You can catch your breath there." He studied the map, lips twitching with reluctant gratitude. "Thanks." Rowan glanced at the melting bag in his lap. "May I at least keep the ice cream cold while you walk?" Evan paused, clearly debating, but then he shook his head. She said she wanted it exactly like this. Same flavor, same wrapper. "It's part of the memory, part of our tradition." Rowan said nothing, just nodded, something softening in her expression. As the car rolled to a stop at the edge of the shortcut, she spoke one last time. "You remind me of someone I knew, someone who gave everything for someone else, not for praise, just because." Evan met her gaze. That's what parents do. Then, without waiting, he stepped out into the storm again. The door shut behind him, and Rowan, still watching, didn't order the driver to move. Not yet. Because something about him soaking wet, spine straight, carrying ice cream like a treasure lingered. Like a story just beginning. Rain streamed down the tinted windows as Rowan sat silently in the back seat, her gaze locked on the retreating figure of the man who had just stepped out. Evan's shoulders were squared, despite the downpour that had already soaked through his shirt again. He cradled the bag like something sacred, walking briskly but without panic, as if this were just another ordinary challenge in an unglamorous, uncomplaining life. The windshield wipers kept a steady rhythm. The driver, Harrison, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Would you like me to drive on, Mom?" he asked softly. She didn't respond right away. Something about the man, his refusal to take help, the gentle way he spoke about his daughter, the way he insisted on walking through a storm just to keep a birthday promise, settled in her chest and wouldn't let go. It wasn't pity she felt. It was something sharper, familiar. "No," she said after a long pause. "Not yet." She watched as Evan turned down the alley she had shown him. A flash of lightning briefly lit up the street, and she saw him pause to pull the ice cream bag a little closer to his chest, shielding it with his body. It was such a small thing, but somehow it told her everything she needed to know about him. "He reminded me of my father," she said suddenly. Harrison's brows lifted in the mirror. "Mr. Wexley." She nodded. "Before the company, when we still lived in that old one-bedroom near the train line, he'd walk through storms just to bring me soup from the corner market when I was sick. Never complained, never told anyone. Rare kind of man." "Yeah," she murmured, "and I almost forgot they existed." The silence returned, except now it pulsed with something unspoken. Rowan looked down at her perfectly pressed pantsuit, then at her designer bag on the leather seat beside her. She felt insulated, protected, but also separated. She thought of Evan's soaked shoes. She thought of the girl who was waiting for her ice cream. Then, in a voice firm and low, she said, "Harrison, find out who he is." He hesitated. "You sure just his name? No invasion. I want to know who would walk through a thunderstorm for a promise that no one else would know about." Harrison gave a small nod and put the car in gear. As the luxury car eased forward, its wheels whispering across the rain-slicked street, Rowan didn't look away from the alley, now empty except for shadows. She had meetings, contracts, shareholder calls, but none of that would matter tonight, because now there was a story she couldn't stop thinking about, and it began with a man who didn't want help, only directions. The car glided through the rain-slicked streets of the city, but Rowan's mind wasn't in the present anymore. It had drifted back to a time when the world was bigger and colder, and she was a girl with silent dinners, hollow birthdays, and windows that fogged from the inside because no one ever opened them. She remembered the long, echoing hallways of her childhood home. A mansion, yes, but also a mausoleum for laughter. Her father had been kind but distant, buried under the weight of a collapsing business. Her mother had been beautiful, distracted, and always one step out the door. Rowan had learned early not to ask for much, especially not for birthdays. Her 7th birthday stood out. She had asked just once for strawberry ice cream, her favorite. Her nanny had smiled apologetically and said there wasn't time. The housekeeper forgot. Her mother was in Milan, and so she sat on the edge of her bed that night wearing a party dress no one saw, eating a slice of cake by herself. No candles, no singing, just the faint hum of the city and the ache of being invisible. Now watching the raindrops race each other across the window, she blinked. That man, Evan, soaked to the bone, clutching that little bag with such care, it wasn't just an act of kindness. It was what she had longed for, not the ice cream, but the intention, the devotion, the presence. He hadn't asked for attention. He hadn't broadcast his sacrifice. He just did what needed to be done for the sake of someone small who mattered to him. Rowan leaned back in the seat, her heart tight. For all her success for the towers with her name on them, for the boardrooms and private jets, she suddenly felt she had missed something along the way. A simple promise kept in the rain. She didn't want pity for the girl she used to be. But maybe, just maybe, she could do something for the girl who waited tonight. The one with her nose pressed to the window, waiting for ice cream, waiting for proof that she mattered. Rowan pulled out her phone and opened her assistant's number. Rowan, cancel my dinner and push the morning meeting. Something's come up. As she hit send, her reflection stared back at her in the window, older, wiser, and finally perhaps ready to listen to the small, forgotten voice that still whispered beneath all the noise. Rowan wasn't impulsive by nature. Her life ran on precision, schedule, strategy, silence between the lines. But something about the man in the soaked hoodie haunted her. Not in a sentimental way, in a way that tugged at her curiosity, then tightened like a knot around her conscience. She wanted to know who he was, not for press, not for a tax write-off, for herself. The next morning, she arrived early at her office tower, a quiet storm behind her eyes. Her assistant Noelle greeted her with coffee and a curious glance. "You canceled dinner last night. Everything all right?" Rowan simply nodded. "I need you to help me find someone." Noelle blinked. This wasn't standard. A business lead, number, a man. He was walking in the storm yesterday evening near Westgate and Halcyon. Rowan handed her the only detail. She had a mental image and a time window. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Hoodie, holding a plastic bag like it was treasure. Polite. Refused help. Noelle, ever professional, said nothing but nodded. She was used to odd requests from wealthy clients in her early career. But from Rowan, this was new. An hour later, a few strings quietly pulled. Traffic camera feeds reviewed. No law broken, just influence leveraged in silence. And then, there he was. A still frame, Evan head, bowed, soaked to the skin, clutching the bag from the corner store like it held more than just ice cream. His shoes left small floods with every step. They traced him to the convenience store. A receipt pulled 1 pint of strawberry swirl. The timestamp matched. Later that afternoon, Noelle returned with a printed file lightly bound. Name Evan Torres, former electrician, now working part-time at a community center and doing evening janitorial work. Widowed. 1 daughter, age 7, no criminal record, no known debts, lives in Brookwood Terrace. Rowan held the file longer than necessary, fingers unmoving. Widowed. 1 daughter. The image of him handing over soaked bills for frozen dessert while his child waited flickered again. This wasn't charity. This was a man keeping his world from crumbling, 1 scoop at a time. She looked up. "Let's keep this between us." I want to meet him again, but not as myself. Noelle tilted her head, intrigued. Then as Rowan smiled softly, the kind that no press photographer had ever caught. As someone who knows what it's like to wait for ice cream that never came. It started with a hallway conversation. Rowan was walking past the facilities office on the lower level of her company's headquarters when she paused, almost instinctively. A clipboard was taped to the door with casual notes about last week's interviews, janitorial candidates. Something pulled her in. Inside, she found Thomas, the night shift supervisor, drinking coffee and organizing supplies. Rowana Miss Vale, he stood quickly, unsure how to address the company's founder on his turf. No need, she smiled. I just had a question. He blinked, surprised. Have you ever interviewed a man named Evan Torres? I believe he might have applied here recently. Thomas scratched his chin. Torres Evan? Yeah, about 2 months ago. Strong build, quiet, seemed overqualified actually. He didn't say much, but you could tell he took pride in small things, eye for detail. Rowan leaned in. Why didn't we hire him? Thomas sighed. We were mid-transition. HR froze new hires that week, budget issues. I told him he'd be a good fit. Never heard back. He didn't follow up. She nodded slowly, digesting more than just words. He just needed a steady job, Thomas continued. But he never begged, just thanked me for the time. That sat heavy in her chest. Back upstairs, she accessed internal files. His name was still in the system, buried in the rejected applicant folder. Clean background, solid references, a handwritten cover letter, carefully phrased neat script. I don't mind hard work. I believe in showing up, being honest, and earning trust. That's what I try to teach my daughter. Her throat tightened. This wasn't someone who wanted pity. This was someone trying to rebuild with his hands full and his head high. She closed the file, picked up her phone. Thomas, she said when he answered, if he walks in again, you hire him. No interview, no delay. She didn't say why. She didn't need to. Rowan Vale wasn't used to walking without heels clicking against marble. But today her shoes were flats, her blazer traded for a sweater, and her driver instructed to drop her 2 blocks away from the address she found. Evan Torres lived in a modest neighborhood, a row of weathered houses with small front porches, and children's bikes leaned against fences. The rain from earlier had left puddles, and the scent of damp earth lingered. She stood across the street unnoticed. Evan stepped out of the house carrying a grocery bag in one arm and a little girl about 5 or 6 in the other. She was in pajamas, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. Rowan watched as he locked the front door, with one hand balancing his child with a gentleness that didn't match his rough exterior. No nanny, no delivery service, no security detail, just a dad and his daughter. They walked to the corner market. He greeted the clerk by name, joked about canned soup being on sale. The clerk laughed, said, "You always make her laugh, man. That's a gift." Rowan saw it, the way the daughter leaned into him, the way he gave her the first bite of a chocolate bar even before he opened his own. They passed a woman struggling with her recycling bin. Evan stopped, set down the groceries, helped without fanfare. Didn't even wait for thanks. Back at the house, she noticed the paint on the porch rail was peeling, but the plants were watered. The light bulb on the porch had been recently changed. A hand-drawn sign on the door read, "Welcome to the Torres house. We believe in second chances." Rowan blinked. Once. Twice. Then turned and walked back to her car, her heart full and heavy. She had more than just admiration now. She had clarity and a responsibility she wasn't ready to ignore. The envelope was hand-delivered in the morning mail. No logo, no signature. Just a clean, cream-colored rectangle with Evan's name printed in soft serif lettering. He opened it cautiously. Inside, a simple letter. Dear Mr. Torres, we are impressed by your past application and community references. A position has opened at Vale Industries Maintenance Division. Flexible hours, full benefits, room to grow. Please call the number below if interested. No resume required, no mention of charity, no trace of pity. It was addressed to him like a man of worth. And though he didn't know it yet, the person who pushed this offer through sat several floors above that maintenance division, watching the day's hiring list refresh with quiet anticipation. Rowan had made sure it came through HR. No strings, no fanfare. Just an open door left ajar. If he walked through it, it would be because he chose to. That night, Evan stared at the letter over dinner. His daughter reached for his hand. "Daddy, you look happy." He smiled a little surprised at himself. "Yeah, kiddo," he said softly. "I think something good just showed up." And across town, Rowan looked out her penthouse window, not at the skyline, but toward the neighborhoods below. Sometimes the most powerful help isn't loud. It's silent, and it lets the person keep their pride. Evan held the phone in his hand for nearly an hour before calling. His thumb hovered over the number like it might bite him back. Had been offered too many opportunities before that ended in disappointment. Unpaid training, shifts that disappeared, promises made in bright lobbies that dim with reality. Still, something about this offer felt different. The way the letter had spoken to him, not at him. Respectful, simple. He made the call. The voice on the other end was calm and kind. No corporate coldness, just instructions. "Come in for orientation at 7 p.m. tomorrow. We'll show you around. You decide after that. No pressure, no hard sell." So he went. The building loomed in glass and stone, Vale Industries etched into the steel like it had always belonged there. He entered through a side door, not the grand front, his boots still damp from the rain 2 days ago. A woman in maintenance uniform, Janine, greeted him. "You must be Evan. Come on, he'll show you the ropes." The shift was quiet, peaceful almost. Empty boardrooms, polished floors. A few late-night engineers nodded politely as they passed. No one sneered, no one questioned his presence. He worked with focus, grateful for the rhythm of motion. Mop, rinse, repeat. Wipe, straighten, check. He was good at this. He always had been. And it mattered to him that it be done right. Janine noticed. "You're overqualified," she said casually during their break. He just smiled. "I'm a dad. Being overqualified is part of the job." Back upstairs in a different wing, Rowan checked the building's internal schedule. She saw his name listed, Evan Torres Temp Maintenance Night, and quietly smiled. He was in. By choice. By dignity. And the real journey had just begun. Rowan Vale didn't often linger in her office past midnight, but tonight something kept her from leaving. From her corner suite on the 12th floor, she looked out not at the skyline, but at the security monitor beside her desk. One feed showed the executive lobby empty except for the faint reflection of moonlight on marble. Another showed the hallway by the service elevators. And there she spotted him. Even, wearing the same faded boots, uniform neat, shoulders squared. He wasn't just doing the job, he was paying attention. He moved a crooked floor mat so no one would trip, stopped to pick up a crumpled flyer someone left behind, smiled and nodded at a young coder who had clearly pulled a too-late shift and looked more lost than productive. Rowan tilted her head slightly. He held the door open for a delivery guy balancing boxes of takeout. No questions, no judgment. Later, he paused by the reception desk and refilled the candy jar that someone had forgotten. No one was watching him, except she was. From her darkened office, Rowan felt something unfamiliar. Admiration, not for accomplishment, but for quiet decency. Not everyone treated staff with respect. She knew that too well. She had built a company where kindness was written into the policies, but lived unevenly through the people. Evan lived it effortlessly. When he helped the temp at night move her fallen charger cord, or when he offered half of his vending machine sandwich to the older security guard, it wasn't performance. It was who he was. The camera didn't capture sound, but it didn't need to. Every movement told her something she hadn't known she was looking for. Not just competence, not even just compassion, consistency. She leaned back in her chair, whispered to herself, no wonder she wanted ice cream in the rain. And for the first time in weeks, she stayed until the building was quiet, not because of work, but because of the man quietly sweeping behind the glass walls. Evan never looked for praise. He didn't expect it when he fixed the humming vending machine that had been swallowing coins for days. He didn't wait for thanks when he stayed late to help the overnight cleaner Marta lift heavy bins because her back had been acting up. To him, people were people. Janitors, programmers, executives, everyone deserved care. It was how he was raised and how he was raising his daughter. One night, a junior developer named Theo dropped his backpack in the hallway, papers spilling everywhere. It was late, most had gone home. Evan happened to be walking by with his mop. He crouched without a word and helped gather the scattered papers. Theo looked surprised. Thanks. I didn't think anyone else was around. Evan gave a small smile. People always are, just not always the ones you expect. That line lingered. Another time he found post-it notes left on the elevator buttons. Someone frustrated writing passive-aggressively about sticky fingers. Instead of ignoring it, Evan brought a gentle cleaner the next shift and polished the panel until it shined. Then he left his own note, handled it. No more stick. Let's stay kind. In a place where hierarchy often defined interaction, Evan blurred those lines with quiet respect. The staff started noticing. Word spread. A few employees began greeting him by name. Someone brought extra soup one night and left it by the break room with a sticky note. For Evan, he never said much, but his kindness created ripples. In the corner office, Rowan heard about these moments secondhand. She never asked for updates. She didn't need to, because culture wasn't built by announcements. It was built by people like him. The night was quiet, just the hum of the janitor's cart and the soft buzz of fluorescent lights above. Rowan stood by the break room window, a cup of untouched tea in her hand. Evan had just finished wiping down the counters, the smell of citrus cleaner faint in the air. He gave a polite nod, ready to leave her to her solitude. But she spoke. You walked in the rain for ice cream. Most people wouldn't. He paused, then gave a shrug. It was her birthday. She wanted one thing. Rowan smiled, but there was a sadness behind it. She's a lucky. He glanced at her, uncertain. Rowan took a breath. I wasn't there when my little brother needed me. We were young. I was already focused on ambition, building something, becoming someone. And I missed the signs. She looked away. He didn't make it. Depression. It hit him quiet hard. I buried myself in work after that. Grew the company, grew my wealth. But none of it filled the empty seat at the table. Evan didn't speak. He didn't offer cliches. He just stood still. She turned toward him again. That day I saw you soaked shoes falling apart holding that little bag for your daughter. I remembered what it meant to show up. Just show up. He met her gaze. Sometimes that's all we can do. Rowan exhaled the silence between them, soft, not heavy. I'm not proud of the road I took, she said, but I'm trying to build a better one, starting with this place, and maybe with you. Evan nodded slowly. We all start somewhere. It wasn't a grand moment. No speeches, no drama, just two people, one grieving the past, one trying to shape a future, both standing under the same quiet light. It was a Saturday afternoon. The skies were clear, the sidewalks freshly dried from the rain the night before. Evan had finished his overnight shift just hours earlier, but refused to let exhaustion stop him. It was their weekend tradition, walk to the corner store, pick out a snack, and if they had a few dollars left, her favorite ice cream. Strawberry swirl in a cup with rainbow sprinkles. Are we going to get the same one as my birthday? Lily asked, tugging at his hand. If they haven't run out, Evan smiled, ruffling her hair. The bell above the store door jingled as they walked in. He lifted Lily up so she could peer into the cold glass of the ice cream case. But before she could decide, her eyes lit up. Across the store near the bottled water aisle stood Rowan. In jeans, a soft cashmere sweater, and a loose ponytail, she looked nothing like the CEO of a billion-dollar firm. She looked human. Lily gasped, "It's her." Before Evan could say anything, Lily slipped from his grasp and ran across the aisle. Rowan heard the patter of small feet and turned just in time to catch the full-force hug of a child flinging herself into her arms. Hi, Lily grinned. You're the car lady. Rowan laughed, caught off guard but genuinely moved. I guess I am. You remember me? Lily asked, still holding tight. Of course I do, Rowan said softly. I remember everything about that night. Evan finally made his way over, slightly embarrassed. Lily. But Rowan just smiled. It's okay. She's stronger than most people I meet in boardrooms. Lily tugged Rowan's hand. We're getting ice cream. Want to come? There was a beat of hesitation. Then Rowan knelt down and whispered, strawberry swirl with rainbow sprinkles. Lily's eyes widened. How did you know? She told me, Rowan said, glancing up at Evan. He gave a small shrug. She was pretty excited that night. The three of them walked to the counter together. 3 cups, 3 spoons. Outside on the bench, Lily happily swung her legs while telling Rowan all about school, her favorite teacher, and how Evan once burned pancakes but still made her eat them. Rowan laughed more that day than she had in years. And Evan, he sat beside them quietly, a little stunned, a little grateful. Sometimes the simplest moments come back around, not as grand gestures, but as quiet repairs of something that once broke. One bite of strawberry, swirl at a time. The janitorial crew had always been close-knit, not gossipy in a mean way, but tight enough that changes never went unnoticed. And lately there had been changes. Evan, who usually kept to himself, had started receiving quiet visits from a woman no one had ever seen around the back halls of the headquarters before. She was elegant, graceful, clearly from a different world. She didn't wear an ID badge. She didn't ask for directions. She just showed up sometimes during shift changes or near the employee caf, waiting with a coffee or slipping something into the donation bin beside his locker. Once someone spotted her helping Evan load cleaning supplies into a storage room. That was when the whispers began. Who is she? She's not from the janitorial department. Did you see her shoes? I heard she drives a Bentley. I swear she's one of the board members. No, she's Rowan Vale. The Rowan Vale. Silence always followed that sentence. The Rowan Vale CEO, tech mogul, philanthropist. The woman whose signature graced the top of the annual reports. The one who rarely gave interviews, but whose decisions shaped industries. The one with the guarded smile and rumored billion-dollar mind. Why would she be talking to him? That was the real question, wasn't it? Evan heard the murmurs echo in the hallways, felt the glances during breaks. Some coworkers offered knowing smiles. Others didn't smile at all. Even Lily noticed. Daddy, why did Mr. Jeff look weird at Miss Rowan? He'd smiled gently and ruffled her hair. Because sometimes grown-ups don't understand what matters. Rowan, for her part, never acted like anything was wrong. She kept showing up, not often but enough. Enough to quiet some doubts. Enough to stoke others. And slowly the whisper spread further. Past the janitor crew, past the cafeteria, to the boardroom. Is she seeing someone? She's protecting him? Is it favoritism? Maybe it's deeper. One afternoon, Evan entered the break room and found his supervisor, Carla, waiting. She didn't mince words. There's talk, Evan. He sighed. I figured some of it's not kind, and some of it, well, it's from higher up. I'm not doing anything wrong. Carla looked at him steady and kind. No, you're not. That's what scares them. He nodded slowly, a quiet weight settling on his shoulders. She helped me once. I didn't know who she was. Still treat her the same. Carla offered a tired smile. Well, that might be exactly why she keeps coming back. Outside in a dark corner of the parking lot, Rowan sat in her car, staring up at the office building. She knew what they were saying. She knew she'd crossed an invisible line. But when she remembered Evan soaked to the bone, refusing a handout for the sake of a daughter's smile, the lines didn't seem so important anymore. Not when the truth was simple. She wasn't protecting him. He had saved her first. The invitation had arrived in a crisp envelope with gold, embossing the kind Evan usually tossed in the recycling, assuming it wasn't meant for him. But this time it was addressed specifically to him, not to janitorial services, not to resident staff, to Evan Hart. Inside it read, "You are warmly invited to the annual Vale Innovations Gala. Dress code, formal. Location, Grand Atrium Ballroom, 7 p.m. And at the bottom in clean serif font, Rowan Vale." He had stared at it for a long time. Then he'd stared at his reflection, wondering what someone like him was supposed to wear to a place like that. The ballroom glittered, all glass and chandeliers, gold-trimmed curtains swaying gently with the air conditioning. It smelled of polished marble and expensive perfume. Evan stepped in wearing a modest black jacket and borrowed shoes. He'd done his best to look presentable, but there was no hiding the calluses on his hands or the way he kept tugging at the borrowed collar. He didn't belong here, and everyone saw it. Whispers began the moment he entered. Who let the help in? Is he security? No, he's the janitor. I've seen him mopping the mezzanine. Did he win something? Maybe they have a service award. Even though the voices were quiet, the stares were not. One man in a tailored blue tuxedo muttered under his breath as he walked past, "Try not to spill mop water on the floor, buddy." Evan didn't respond. He just moved through the crowd, slowly keeping to the edge of the room. He recognized a few faces, the late-night tech guy who always nodded at him in the hallway, the CFO he once helped when her car battery died. None of them approached. He didn't expect them to. He was nearly ready to slip out when he heard a familiar voice. Avon, he turned. Rowan stood just behind him in a deep emerald gown, elegant and composed and smiling. The room shifted. Conversations paused. Several executives blinked. She continued unfazed. I was hoping you'd come. He gestured awkwardly at his clothes. Didn't know if I should. She looked him in the eye. I invited you. That's enough. Rowan looped her arm through his gently. Come, I want you to meet someone. As they walked together, billionaire and janitor arm in arm, the murmurs grew quieter, and the eyes watching began to change. Not everyone stopped judging, but some started wondering. Who was this man that Rowan Vale respected enough to welcome in front of them all? And why, for the first time in years, did she look like she was standing beside someone she actually trusted? Evan didn't care about the suits, the whispers, or the awkward stares anymore. He was here because of a promise to his daughter, and a kindness returned. And Rowan. She had stopped thinking in terms of class a long time ago. The string quartet fell silent. Glasses clinked quietly. A hush settled over the ballroom like mist, curious and heavy. Rowan stepped onto the stage, her heels silent on the polished wood floor. She adjusted the microphone, took a breath, not the rehearsed kind, but the kind you take before doing something irreversible. I'd like to say a few words before we present this year's Innovation Award. She paused. Many in the crowd assumed she would offer the usual speech numbers, market shares, thin smiles. Instead, she glanced toward the back of the room, toward Evan, his brow furrowed. This company, Rowan began, has prided itself on innovation for over a decade. But tonight I want to speak about a different kind of brilliance, the kind you don't find on balance sheets. She scanned the room. Her voice was steady, but her hand tightened around the edge of the podium. Last month, during the worst rainstorm in years, I was stranded on a corner with a flat tire and a dead phone. Dozens of people drove past. One man didn't. She let that hang in the air. He was soaked through, carrying a melting ice cream cone, clearly exhausted. But he stopped. He offered help even when he didn't have much to give. He didn't recognize me, didn't care who I was. He just asked if I was okay. Some in the crowd were already whispering. Rowan continued. That man is Evan Hart. He works nights here. He took a job far beneath his capabilities to support his daughter. And tonight he stands in this room not because of pity, not because of charity, but because he represents the kind of humanity we want this company to stand for. Silence. One executive near the front leaned toward another. Is she serious? She's putting a janitor in the gala, someone muttered near the back. To prove what exactly, Rowan didn't flinch. I've heard the whispers tonight, she said calmly, about how he looks, about whether he belongs. She paused again, letting her gaze travel across the faces, some defensive, some ashamed, some simply stunned. And I'll say this clearly, if Evan Hart doesn't belong in this room, then neither do I. Gasps. A few investors shifted in their seats. I owe him more than you know, but what matters more is what you owe him. Because we are not a company of titles, we are a company of people. And we can't claim to lead the future if we still judge others by the shoes on their feet instead of the soul in their steps. Applause began quietly. A few claps from the staff near the back, then more. Soon it was a wave. Rowan nodded once and stepped down. Evan looked stunned. She passed him, smiled quietly and whispered, for your daughter, so she never has to walk through rain alone. And the murmurs didn't return after that. Because once a billionaire steps off her pedestal to stand beside a soaked father with dignity, even the coldest boardroom begins to thaw. The afterglow of the gala didn't last long. By Monday morning, the headlines began to roll in. Billionaire CEO defends janitor at gala investors. Divided humanity or publicity. Stunt. Rowan Kavanaugh's unscripted speech. Shocks board. Who is Evan Hart? In her office, Rowan stood in front of a bank of windows, coffee in hand, jaw tight. On her desk, a stack of printed articles, some praising her, others laced with skepticism. The company's stock dipped 2 points by noon. By 2, the PR director, Meredith, stepped in with a grim face. We've got a problem, she said flatly. The investors are rattled. They think you've gone emotional. Rowan didn't turn. I have emotions. I just finally let them speak. Meredith softened but persisted. The optics matter. The board's demanding an emergency meeting tomorrow. They want clarity. Strategy. Strategy, Rowan echoed. Since when is decency a liability? Meredith glanced toward the hallway. They want to know if this was a one-time speech or a sign you're changing direction. Rowan finally faced her. I am. Meredith blinked. Rowan, I'm tired of running a company that forgets the people who make it possible. She tapped one of the headlines. We say we're built on values. Then let's start acting like it. Meanwhile, in the maintenance hallway, Evan worked silently, headphones and polishing the marble near the executive wing. But he could feel the stares. Two men passed behind him, whispering, That's the guy. From the gala. No way. That speech about him. He kept working. Quiet. Measured. Then a woman, one of the HR interns, passed and said gently, I thought it was brave. What she said. He nodded and unsure what to say. All this attention, it felt like standing in wet shoes again, uncomfortable and unfamiliar. That night, Rowan sat in the dim light of her office. Her assistant entered with two things, a thick folder and a cup of peppermint tea. From the crisis team, she said, nodding to the folder. And from Evan. Rowan raised an eyebrow. The assistant handed her a folded piece of paper. Rowan opened it. A child's handwriting. Thank you for making my dad feel like a superhero. He is, from Molly. Rowan held the note to her chest and closed her eyes. They were in a storm now of media opinions, shareholders. But she'd been in worse. And if the storm was the price of doing what was right, she'd walk into it. Just like Evan had soaked in rain, holding melting ice cream, because love was worth it. The boardroom was all glass and chrome, pristine, intimidating, and cold. Evan stood at one end, not wearing a tailored suit, not holding a PowerPoint clicker, but wearing his usual work shirt boots, clean but still worn at the edges. Beside him stood Rowan, calm but resolute. 12 board members sat at the long table, their expressions ranging from skeptical to downright dismissive. One of them, a man with silver hair and a reputation for hard-nosed decisions, broke the silence. Mr. Hart, with all due respect, you're a janitor. Why are we here? Evan looked down for a moment, then raised his eyes steady. Because someone who mops your floors might know what's happening below them. A few murmurs, a smirk from one end of the table. He continued, You're worried about PR, about image. But the heart of this company isn't headlines, it's people. And people don't invest their lives in logos, they invest in how they're treated. A pause. Rowan watched him silently, hands clasped. I've worked jobs where we were invisible, Evan said. And I've raised a daughter with the hope that kindness still matters, that dignity doesn't come from your paycheck. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. It was creased and slightly damp. Molly's thank you note. He didn't read it. He just held it up. This matters more than the stock price. There was a long silence. Then Rowan spoke. We talk about innovation, she said, her voice steady. But we forget that the greatest innovation is empathy, not technology, not margins, but people who care. Another board member, a woman with sharp eyes and a quiet presence, finally leaned forward. What do you propose? Evan looked to Rowan. She gave a small nod. He cleared his throat. I don't want a handout or a promotion, but I've seen what this company could be if you let more voices in. So here's my idea. He laid it out simply. A ground-level employee advisory panel made up of janitors, cafeteria staff, delivery drivers, the people usually left out of meetings. A quarterly town hall where decisions weren't just handed down, but explained, questioned, understood. A mentorship program between executives and workers who could never imagine stepping foot in this room. Because you can't lead a company you don't listen to, Evan said, finishing quietly. And people follow heart before they follow hierarchy. The boardroom was still. Then the sharp-eyed woman smiled. That, she said, is the most honest proposal we've heard in years. And one by one, heads began to nod. After the meeting, as the board filtered out, several paused to shake Evan's hand. One murmured, that kid of yours has a good man to look up to. When the room was nearly empty, Rowan stood beside him. You just saved the future of this company, she whispered. He chuckled. Not bad for a janitor with wet boots, she smiled soft. You might need a new title. Evan shook his head. Titles don't matter. He glanced toward the window where rain had just begun to fall again. But what you stand for does. Evan didn't sleep much that night. His phone had buzzed for hours, messages from Rowan, her assistant, even 2 board members, all offering congratulations, all urging him to consider stepping up. Officially. But all he could think about was Molly, her tiny arms around his neck as he talked to her in her sleepy voice saying, "Daddy, you were amazing today." Everyone clapped. He smiled now, standing outside Rowan's office the next morning, still in his worn boots, shirt tucked in, this time a small nod to the formality ahead. Rowan looked up as he stepped in. "You came," she said softly. "You asked," he said. "I figured I owed you that much." "No," she said, standing. "You don't owe me anything. If anything, I owe you. This company does." She motioned to the seat across from her desk. They voted unanimously. Chief Community Officer, full benefits, leadership seat, your own team. Evan blinked. "That's a lot. You earned it." He stared at the floor for a long moment, fingers tapping his knees. "I never wanted a title." Rowan smiled. "I know. I don't want an office I'm stuck in. I don't want to forget what this feels like, the wet floors, the graveyard shifts, the people who clean before dawn." Rowan tilted her head. "So what do you want?" Evan looked up. "I want to keep mopping sometimes. I want to still eat lunch with the night shift. I want to shake hands with the guy who parks cars and know his name." He paused. "If I can have that, if I can stay grounded, then yeah. I'll take it." Rowan smiled. "Done. No suit, no politics, ill-run interference." Evan leaned back, the weight of it beginning to sink in. "Then, I accept." She stood and reached across the desk, shaking his hand. "Welcome to the leadership team." He grinned just a little. "What's the pay?" Rowan laughed. Enough for all the ice cream Molly could ever want. They both chuckled, the tension easing. As he turned to go, Rowan called after him. "You know, Evan, we used to believe good leadership came from strategy. And now we believe it comes from soaked boots and a promise kept in the rain." Evan didn't say anything. He just smiled wide, quiet, full. Rowan had been in boardrooms her whole adult life, places where image was armor and power came with polish. She was used to control of her schedule, her space, her silence. But nothing had prepared her for Molly. The little girl had barreled into her office after school like a burst of sunlight, in sneakers, holding a crumpled drawing in one hand and two mismatched hair ties in the other. "Hi, Miss Rowan. Daddy said you were super busy, but I brought you something." Shed marched right up to the sleek glass desk, placed the paper down like it was a $1 million contract and smiled. A picture of 3 stick figures, one with a crown, clearly Rowan, one taller, Evan, and one small with pigtails, herself under a giant rainbow. Rowan blinked. "Is that me?" Molly nodded. "Yup, I gave you a sparkle dress too." Rowan swallowed the lump in her throat. "It's beautiful." Then came the next part. The part that changed everything. "Can I braid your hair now?" Rowan froze. She hadn't let anyone touch her hair in years, not since her own mother, who used to comb it slowly while humming old lullabies. But there was something about Molly's hopeful eyes, something innocent and whole. Rowan hesitated. Then slowly she lowered herself onto the floor beside Molly's chair. "Be gentle," she murmured. Molly giggled. "I always am." And with tiny fingers and absolute concentration, Molly went to work separating strands, whispering little stories, looping soft braids that were more heart than skill. Evan watched from the doorway, not interrupting, just smiling. For the first time in a long while, Rowan didn't feel like the boss, or the billionaire, or the woman who'd built an empire from steel and sleepless nights. She just felt human. Later, as she glanced in the mirror, lopsided braids framing her face, Rowan touched one and whispered, "You did good, kiddo." To herself, maybe, to Molly, and to the part of her that hadn't let love in for years. Evan didn't expect much for his birthday. He never did. The calendar said it was just another Tuesday and the sink was leaking again, and Molly's science project, something with paper MCH planets, was due tomorrow. He had work that night and bills on the counter and a hoodie with a tear under the sleeve. Normal life. Real life. Molly had drawn him a card, of course. A lopsided heart with the words, "Best Daddy Ever," in glitter glue. He'd smiled, ruffled her hair, and tucked it in his coat pocket, like treasure. But still, no cake, no candles. He didn't tell anyone at work. Why would he? So when the elevator dinged on the top floor and the doors opened to the executive lounge, a space Evan had only cleaned and never entered as a guest, he hesitated. There was a small table set up, nothing extravagant. Just a modest cake, 2 scoops of mint chip, in glass dishes, and a single flickering candle. Rowan stood behind it, not in heels but flats. Her sleeves rolled. No press, no board, just her. "I thought you didn't like surprises," Evan said, blinking. "I don't," she replied, "but some birthdays deserve one anyway." He walked in slowly, eyes on the ice cream. "Mint chip," she smiled. "Molly told me. She said it's your favorite, but only if it's the soft kind, not the chalky stuff." He laughed. "She's right." Rowan lit the candle with a match that sputtered and flared. "Make a wish." He stared at the flame. "I don't know what to wish for," he admitted. "Then just breathe," she said softly. "That's enough." He did. And when he blew out the candle, it wasn't just the flame that went out. It was the old ache, the sense of being forgotten, the quiet idea that no one ever celebrated him. They sat together, the billionaire and the janitor, sharing mint chip in peace. "Next year," Rowan said, tapping her spoon against his, "you better bring the cake." He raised a brow. "Is that a promise?" "It's a dare." And for the first time in a long time, Evan looked forward to next year. It was a quiet evening, the kind that wrapped the world in soft orange light and the smell of something baking, banana bread maybe. Evan had finally finished fixing the broken drawer in the kitchen. Molly was at the table, her tiny hands sticky with glue as she worked on a glittery cutout for school. Rowan sat nearby, carefully helping her fold colored paper into tiny stars. She looked nothing like the billion-dollar executive she was. Her blazer had been traded for a soft sweater. Her shoes were off. Her laughter was real, not rehearsed for any camera or boardroom. Evan leaned on the doorframe watching them. He hadn't said much. The days had grown warmer. Rowan had become a part of their lives in a way no one else had. She helped him and Molly with projects, listened to Evan's mother's long stories with patience, and brought tea when she noticed he was tired. But there had never been a formal talk. No definition, no lines drawn, only moments. And maybe that was why the question hit so hard. It came in a whisper when Molly thought no one else could hear. Rowan had tucked a lock of hair behind Molly's ear and praised her latest drawing. Molly smiled. Then, without lifting her eyes, she asked, "Can she stay forever?" Rowan's hands paused. Her breath caught just for a second. Evan froze his heart suddenly in his throat. Molly looked up. "Not just visit, not just birthdays. Like be part of us." The room held its breath. Rowan slowly turned toward Evan, her eyes searching, uncertain. "I didn't mean," she began, but Evan stepped forward. "You don't have to say anything now," he said, gently, kneeling beside Molly. "Sometimes questions like that are big, and big questions take time." Molly frowned. "But it feels right." Rowan smiled a little shakily, a little tearfully, and placed her hand over Molly's. "It feels right to me too," she whispered. Later that night, after Molly had gone to bed, Evan stood on the small porch staring at the stars. Rowan joined him, silent at first. "I've spent my whole life knowing where I belonged," she said. "And then one rainy night, a man refused my money but gave his last dry coat to a stranger. Everything since then has felt different." Evan turned to her. "I don't know what this is, Rowan, but I know it's not nothing." She nodded. "I don't want to be a visitor anymore." And in the hush of that night, under stars and quiet promises, something deeper settled between them. Not declarations, not rings, just the unspoken truth. She might just stay forever. It wasn't in a restaurant or under chandeliers or with a hidden photographer in the bushes. It was a Wednesday. Evan was fixing a leaky pipe under the sink. Rowan was sitting on the floor beside him, sorting screws into old mason jars, humming something under her breath. Molly was in the other room, narrating her latest adventure story to a tired but patient grandmother. The world wasn't holding its breath, but Evan was. For weeks he had wrestled with the question, how do you ask someone to stay when they've already started making your house feel like home? How do you propose not a fairy tale but a real life, one with cracked tiles and grocery budgets and bedtime songs off key? He wiped his hands on a towel. "The leak was fixed, Rowan," he said softly, and the weight in his voice made her look up. She tilted her head. "Everything okay?" "I need to ask you something," he said. Heart thudding, she smiled. "Go ahead." But he didn't pull out a ring. He didn't drop to one knee. He reached instead for the drawer beside her and pulled out a small notebook, Molly's. On the cover was a doodle of the three of them holding hands beneath a crooked sun. "Our family," it read. He opened to the last page. Inside, written in Molly's handwriting, was a question, "Will you be my forever?" Rowan blinked, her mouth parting slightly. She asked me if it was okay to write it or what Evan said, and I told her only if it's a question it'd be proud to ask too. He took a deep breath. I know we're not perfect. I know we're messy and loud and tired half the time. But I also know we're something real. You make us better. You make me better. And I don't need anything more than that. So he reached for her hand. His voice was quiet but steady. Would you be ours? Not just for now, not just on birthdays, but for always. Rowan's lips trembled. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the gentle way her heart cracked open just wide enough to let joy in. She nodded too, choked up to speak, and finally whispered yes. 1,000 quiet, grateful yeses. They sat there, surrounded by the ordinary pipes, tools, the smell of banana bread, and distant laughter from a child. No diamonds, no spotlight, just a forever kind of love. It didn't happen all at once. There was no grand unveiling, no sudden transformation. It started in small ways. Rowan didn't move in with boxes and fanfare. She came with a coffee mug, a favorite worn-out sweater, and a quiet promise to show up every day. Evan, still waking before dawn for shift work, would find his lunch packed neatly with a little note tucked inside. Don't forget your kindness built this. Rowan wasn't trying to change his life. She was simply becoming part of it. Molly adjusted in the way children often do, with wonder and certainty. She made a spot for Rowan on the couch, then in bedtime routines. She asked her to braid her hair in the mornings and hold her hand during school drop-off. One Sunday they planted flowers in the patch of dirt by the front step. They argued about daisies versus tulips and ended up planting both. When rain began to fall, Evan reached for the umbrella, but Rowan stopped him. Let's not hide, she whispered. So they stood there, soaked, laughing, Molly dancing between puddles. No one cared about wet clothes or messy hair. It was just life. Real, raw, shared. Inside, Rowan helped Evan's mother with stretching exercises, slow and careful. She started joining Evan's community volunteering days quietly without press releases or cameras. People began to see her not as that billionaire woman, but as someone willing to roll up her sleeves. And when things were hard, when bills were tight, or Molly had a fever, or Evan felt overwhelmed, they didn't pretend. They sat together in the quiet. Rowan would say, "You don't have to be strong all the time." And Evan would reply, "Neither do you." One evening after dinner and dishes in the soft lull of bedtime stories, Rowan stood in the doorway watching Evan rock Molly gently back to sleep. He looked up at her, tired but peaceful. "We're building something, aren't we?" he asked. Rowan stepped in, wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. "Something small," she said. "Something steady. Something that matters." And she was right. It wasn't luxury or wealth. It wasn't fairy tale or fantasy. It was a life created not by chance but by choice, rooted in rain-soaked shoes, melted ice cream, and the simplest gift of all, showing up. It started with a whisper. After the gala, after the speech, after the shocking revelation that the janitor was now one of the company's most respected voices, it wasn't just the press that took notice. Inside the glass towers of Rowan's company, something began to shift. At first it was subtle. A manager asked their assistant how their weekend really went and listened. A tech lead gave quiet credit to an intern during a product pitch. A cafeteria worker found handwritten thank you notes on their cart. And then Rowan issued a memo. It wasn't corporate, it wasn't polished, it was honest. This company was built on innovation, but it will grow on something deeper, compassion. We move fast, and that's good. But if we forget the people who make this possible, from the janitor to the engineer to the delivery driver, we fail. Starting today, kindness isn't optional. It's who we are. There were skeptics, of course. A few rolled their eyes. Some whispered that this was Rowan being emotional. But then something strange happened. Productivity went up. So did retention. Departments that had been at odds began collaborating. People came in earlier, left later, not because they were afraid, but because they cared. The atmosphere shifted from pressure to purpose. One executive during a leadership meeting leaned back and said, "When the janitor speaks, the room listens now. That's different. That's good." In the break room, Evan noticed small things. A vending machine that used to jam was suddenly fixed. Someone left out umbrellas near the door with a sign that said, "Take one if it's raining." He saw young developers making space for janitorial staff at lunch tables. Rowan didn't turn the company into a nonprofit. She didn't abandon profits. She just added a new line to the mission statement. We don't just build for the world, we build with heart. And she meant it. When an employee's parent fell ill, Rowan showed up with soup. When a teamer reached a major milestone instead of champagne, they donated to a local shelter, the one Evan used to volunteer at. Evan noticed all of it, quietly, gratefully. And he said to Rowan one night as they locked up an office together, "You changed everything." She shook her head. "No, you reminded me how." And for once, Evan didn't deflect. He just smiled. Because the company didn't just shift. It became something real, something good, something that would last. It started with a single post. A former coworker of Evan's, someone who remembered the guy who walked 5 miles in the pouring rain just to keep a promise to his daughter, dug through their old phone gallery and found the photo. Grainy, poorly lit, but powerful. Evan drenched from head to toe, clutching a plastic bag, holding a single tub of ice cream. Head down, boots caked in mud, shoulders stooped from exhaustion. But even in the poor lighting, his expression was clear, determined, gentle. Dad. The caption read, "I worked with this man years ago. He didn't have much, but he had a daughter who loved strawberry ice cream. He said, 'Her smile is worth it. This is what fatherhood looks like.'" The post was meant to be personal. Quiet. It wasn't. By morning, it had been shared over 2 million times. Sad ice cream dad started trending on every platform. Celebrities retweeted it. Parenting forums exploded with praise. News outlets called it the story that melted the internet. People asked, who is he? Where is he now? Why hasn't Hollywood made this a movie yet? When someone linked the post to the recent gala, where the same man had been defended by Rowan Blake herself, people connected the dots. That was him. The janitor, the new community advisor, the man who turned down a luxury ride in the rain because he just wanted to find ice cream before the store closed. At first, Evan was overwhelmed. He never asked for attention. He didn't even use social media. But when Rowan showed him the post over breakfast, he stared at the photo for a long time. "That was a hard day," he murmured. "But a beautiful one," she replied, "because you showed the world what love looks like." Soon the letters began arriving. Emails from dads saying they felt seen. From single moms, teachers, youth volunteers, thanking him for being the kind of man who reminded the world that quiet sacrifices still matter. He even got a request from a national magazine. "Would you be open to sharing your parenting story in a feature called The Heart of Fatherhood?" He declined politely. Instead, he suggested they spotlight the local shelter or the school library drive he'd helped organize. That's who he was. That's who he still is. And in the framed copy of that viral photo now sitting on a shelf beside his daughter's drawings, a little plaque reads, "You don't have to be seen to be good. But sometimes it's good when kindness is seen." It sat in a custom shadow box on a shelf in Rowan Blake's office. Not a diamond award, not a trophy, not a stock certificate, but a melted empty ice cream cone, encased in glass, preserved like treasure. Visitors always asked, CEOs, board members, influencers, interns. They all noticed it. Some laughed politely, some looked confused. One intern even asked if it was a minimalist sculpture. But if they stayed long enough, if they earned her trust, she'd tell them the story. Not the viral version, the real one. He was soaked, she would say softly, fingers grazing the edge of the case. Boots caked in mud, clothes heavy with rain, all for a $3 promise to his little girl. He wouldn't even let me give him a ride. He just smiled and asked for directions. They'd listen, some wide-eyed, some misty, and then Rowan would say the same sentence every time, not rehearsed but remembered. That cone isn't about sacrifice. It's about love, about how the smallest act, when done with heart, can change everything. Because it had. That rainy night had changed her. It softened the billionaire. It redefined success. It rewired a company's values. It turned a single dad into a quiet legend. And down the hall, that single dad was now teaching a group of new hires how to run sustainable community programs. Still in his work boots, still wiping his hands on his jeans, still laughing with that deep, calm voice. His daughter, older now, still asked for strawberry on her birthday. And every year, Rowan made sure it was delivered early, with a note to the girl who reminded me what a promise means. And when the world got too loud or too fast, Rowan would turn to that framed cone, tilt her head and whisper, "Worth every step." Because some stories don't fade with time, they melt into us and stay.